And welcome back to Habs Unfiltered. We are joined now by our special guest. I'm distracted by that jersey behind you. So why don't you tell our listeners who you are and where they can find you while I go throw up?
So my name is Jared Brown. I'm the head scout of North America over at Draft Pro Hockey, and I'm a big Leaf fan. So hopefully there's no fights on this call while I'm on.
You have been reported.
It's okay, and that's the end of the episode.
Yeah. We won't hold it against you. It's a draft show, so we're gonna have fun with this. I mean, what's the point of having a hockey podcast if you can't chirp a little bit and have fun?
Exactly. You gotta poke fun at each other's fan bases, and for myself as a Leaf fan, I gotta poke fun at my own fan base or my own team, which fails to get out of the first round 5 years in a row, and then here's Montreal going to the Cup final, and I'm like, yeah, I would love to have that one of these years.
If it makes you feel any better, Carey Price is going to be injured, and we just lost Shea Weber. So if that makes you feel any better.
You would think it does, but it doesn't. He still beat us in the first round. I guess I can't say anything.
Well, you just said it. You just said it. Canadians beat you guys in the first round, and it was good for me to hear again. So
I'll never get tired of hearing that.
Yeah.
But no, so we're this segment here, we're talking about the NHL draft that's coming up, and as our resident draft expert, Matt brought in the big shooters, the North American draft expert for your website, so for Draft Pro. So Matt, why don't you kick us off with the first question? We'll just dive right into the NHL Entry Draft. That's going to be tomorrow. As we're recording on the Thursday night, so the draft will start tomorrow night.
So let's kick things off. Number one pick is it going to be anybody but Owen Power?
Personally, I don't think so. I think it's going to be Owen Power. I think he is the best player available in this draft. Obviously, it's been a lot closer of a draft class than in previous years. Owen Power is not like Alexei Lafreniere, where he was out by far the best player available in last year's draft, and it was a shoo-in for the Rangers to pick him as soon as they won the draft lottery. But when Buffalo won the draft lottery this year, it definitely was, and it still hasn't been a shoo-in that they'll draft Power. Especially with Power now, coming out and saying that he thinks maybe he would like to go back to the University of Michigan for one more year of seasoning before making the NHL. I wonder if that would influence Buffalo's decision to pick him first overall. I don't think it should. I think Owen Power is the best player available. He's got, just great upside to become a number one pairing defenseman, play in all situations, play 25 minutes a night, and you can, trust him with whatever you throw at him. I think he's the best player available, but we'll see if Buffalo feels the same way.
So do you see him as being an NHL ready prospect that could play, but will probably not?
I think so. I think the big thing for me was I thought his season with the University of Michigan, the NCAA, he had a slow start to the year, but then he came on in the second half, and I thought he settled in really nicely. What really solidifies me to say, yeah, he is NHL ready now was his tournament performance at the World Hockey Championships with Team Canada. To go from playing only 2 minutes or just not playing at all with Canada to then playing over 20 minutes and against men and leapfrogging some NHL players on that roster, even though, as we know, the Team Canada roster wasn't as good as previous years. It's still a pretty big statement to the kid and how good Power is right now. I think what I was most impressed about was how well he can maneuver along the blue line and inside the offensive zone. And I think he showed a little more offensive potential when he was playing with Team Canada. And so I think he is NHL ready right now. If he wants to go back to the University of Michigan for one more year, so be it. that's not the end of the world. That's not going to make him a bust or any worse of a first overall pick. But I still think, he would have no issue coming in and playing and operating as even like the number 4 defenseman on Buffalo.
What do you think his draft floor is? Like the worst case scenario, what he turns into?
I think it's probably as a number 4. I think he can step in as a number 4 right now, as second pairing defenseman. And I think I would be shocked if he would be anything worse than a second pairing defenseman. I think the reason being is there are a lot of intangibles to his game and a lot of assets that I think are already very valuable for a defenseman. And then you factor in his size and how much stronger he's going to get, and the more experience, and the more he learns from an NHL coach, NHL veteran, and all that, it can elevate his game. I really think of him as a Alex Pietrangelo type of player, where his hockey intelligence is his best asset. And players who have a really high IQ normally tend to have a more longer and successful NHL career, in my opinion. And that's why I think his floor is, it'll be as a second pairing defenseman. And then obviously the ceiling, as I said earlier, is a true number 1 defenseman.
So speaking of the University of Michigan, we're likely to see 3 members of the University of Michigan taken in the top 10. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would be surprised if one of them slips out.
So speaking of them, number 2, most likely Matty Beniers.
Yeah, he's probably, and it seems like more and more people are predicting him in their mock drafts for Beniers to go number 2 to Seattle. I think it's just because of the positional need, and his game is more matured and refined than Kent Johnson right now. I think Kent Johnson definitely has the higher upside, and he looks a lot more of a dynamic offensive player than Beniers. But Beniers, you can't not like the way he plays. Like, he plays playoff hockey every single shift, and I think that's why he will go ahead of his teammate in Michigan, Johnson, and why he'll probably go number 2. I'll be surprised if Beniers slips out of the top 5, really.
Well, if you look at who Seattle picked in the expansion draft, they're more a heavier defensive team. So bringing in somebody like Beniers at number 2 would probably be a really good pick for Ron Francis.
Yeah, and the other thing with Beniers is he's a natural centerman. I don't envision him being a winger in the NHL. I think he strives better down the middle because he's more involved in playing that full 200-foot game. I think he can, the way he controls his pace coming through the neutral zone with speed and carrying the puck is something you want your centerman to have. And whereas Kent Johnson, I think he's more like, I would put him, he's a centerman right now, but he could be a winger at the NHL level because his defensive game needs work. And, if he's willing to put in that work, he could become a full-time center at the NHL. But I think, there's the potential for him to be a winger.
There's a question I have. Where do you think Luke Hughes is going to go? Do you feel like New Jersey's going to let him slip by, or are they going to add him to his brother's team?
I think New Jersey right now probably needs more goal-scoring help or more offensive help. They have a good young defenseman in Ty Smith coming up that I think is a really solid player for them. I think it's really hard not to draft the brother and have that, just as even as a marketing standpoint, in a business. I know that's not what we're about, but sometimes the owner could step in and get his voice in the ear of the Jersey's GM, and just the potential to have the brother duo and Luke Hughes is definitely worthy of. I think he can even go. He's a top 5 prospect. It's just that this group, especially in the top 10, is so close together that there is a potential that he slips to the 5 and 10 range. if I'm New Jersey, I'm probably looking for more offensive help. Maybe getting someone like Ken Johnson or Fabian Lysell. But it's definitely intriguing and tempting to take the younger brother of Jack.
Matt?
Right now, if you're looking at a top goal scorer in the draft, who would you be picking?
I'd probably pick Chaz Lucius.
Is it because of his name, or
honestly, I think probably, yeah. And in next year's draft, I'd draft his younger brother too, whose name is Cruz.
oh
So,
my lord!
Yeah, they got quite that's a duo of a name there, and it's funny because Cruz, the younger brother, is he's a really solid playmaker. So now next year's 2022 draft Cruz Lucius and just have him feed his brother. But no, I think Chaz is the best goal scorer available in this draft. I think it's very close. I think there's a lot of players that are have such an NHL ready shot. Chaz Lucius, Mason McTavish, Logan Stankoven, I think, has it. Semu Tuamala, who's projected in the late first. I think, yeah, they have really NHL ready shots right now. But I think Chaz, what sets him apart is his ability to shoot off both feet, in motion, in tight. He can pick his corners from distance or right in front of the net in the home plate. So he's got a really high-end shot and arsenal that he uses to get by goalies. And I think he's a guy who could score 40 goals in the NHL one year.
Now, the NHL draft is not going to be free from any unfortunate press at all this year, thanks to a Mr. Mailloux from the London Knights. Do you feel that anyone is going to actually step up and select this massive defenseman, or are they going to let him slide out of the draft altogether?
I think there's no chance he'll get selected. I think it's just we saw what happened last year with Mitchell Miller with Arizona, and then Arizona renounced that pick and his rights with the team. I think it doesn't make sense, and you have to have Logan Mailloux. He doesn't deserve to be drafted because of the crime he committed, and he needs to have time to be forgiven, right? And right now is not the time that he needs to focus on, or teams need to focus on, for him to be an NHL player. He needs to be focused on becoming a better person, and sending out a sincere apology to the woman that he committed the crime to. So if someone did draft Mailloux, I would be incredibly surprised. He's a great hockey player, but it's just it would not be a smart decision right now.
Yeah, the Canadians get a lot of grief in general for putting such a high standard for character. They want to draft for character, and that's the kind of thing that pays off in the long run. Like you mentioned, the hockey IQ, but so does character. And right now, I don't see any from Logan Mailloux. No,
and how can you say he has character or when he does something like that, right? It's just it's a statement to the way he thinks, even outside of the game and all that, and that's not something that is and it shouldn't be accepted in this day and age. You can't be taking advantage of women like that, and you can't it's just a disgusting act, right? And I think he needs to be the consequences need to be taken, and he needs to, just have time. If he makes the NHL 5 years from now and he has done all of his, he's he's been forgiven and, he's done the right things and all that. I don't know what he would need to do. Obviously there's some, rehab like he could do and talk to, women that have gone through it and he can understand really the pain that he caused on this, on this female. So, yeah, it's not a good look to his character, not at all. And, a good look to his character is, helping out sick kids, going and being a good part of the community and all that, right? And we see that in so many hockey players, and this is just not one of them.
All right, we're going to move on from that nightmare scenario. Matt, you've got some better questions.
So if you're looking for a goaltender, do you taking Sebastian Costa, or are you taking Jesper Wallstedt?
Wallstedt. I think the reason being is he's a lot more mature and poised type of goaltender. I think when I watch him play, I kind of get amazed at his age and how composed he really is. I give him the comparison to Carey Price in that sense, that he doesn't look like he gets fazed by a lot. He's in control of the game. He's in control of what's in front of him, and he's in control of his movements. And that's so important for a goalie his age. Not, there a lot of times you can get a goalie like Costa and who's very athletic, but needs to control his movements a little better, or be a little bit more poised in some of the stuff he does. I think with Costa, there's times where I see that he gets, he's 6'6", but I've seen him sit back down in his butterfly, so his technique could use a little bit of refining and some work. Where with Wallstedt, I find that he's just pretty spot on with his technique and spot on with a lot of his game. I don't find a lot of holes in Wallstedt's game, and I think he just has the maturity to be a franchise-like goalie, like a Carey Price, a Marc-Andre Fleury, or a Vasilevsky.
Do you think Edmonton's going to trade up to try and get one of them?
I think it would be a mistake because their prospect pool is not that big right now. I think if you're Edmonton, you hope that Costa's available at 19. But as of right now, it seems like he's not going to be available. I just saw a report that Chicago had talked with him, and they may draft him. Costa could go at 11 with Chicago now, which so if he drops down to 19 for Edmonton, I think then that's money in the bank. Then I think you select him in a heartbeat. But if they were to trade up in the draft to make sure they get him, off the top of my head, I don't know if Edmonton has a second-round pick, but I would assume that asking price starts with a second-round pick, and now you're leaving your prospect pool, which is already thin. You're leaving it even more bare in Edmonton's spot.
Matt? So I got one more question, and after this, how about Blaine and I will maybe we can throw out some of our suggestions to who we think the Canadians should pick with their pick, and we'll see what you think.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So my question is, what happened to Atu Ratti?
I think he was misevaluated. Like, I think he was, we saw a lot of, the potential in such a young player and what he was doing and getting to the top Finnish league at such a young age. And I think we were all bent on that and saying, wow, that's impressive. And it was, and he looked like a great player. But I think what started to come more into fruition this year was that his offensive creativity and upside is just not really there. It's very average. And he can make questionable decisions with the puck that result in too many turnovers throughout the course of a game. I think what he is so good at is he's got the potential. It's hard to project a player to be a future potential Selke guy, but he is a strong defensive centerman. Like he is a really good attention to detail type centerman. He's an honest player. He works really hard, with a full 200-foot game. I just think what happened with him was he did not show the offensive capabilities to warrant being a top 10 pick. And I think that's what caused him to fall in the rankings. But He's still a young player, and we could be mistaken by this. I mean, and Anton Lundell was one player that is almost the exact similar, where people were questioning his skating even and his offensive ability, and they were more complimenting his defensive and 200-foot game. And now Lundell just had an awesome offensive year in Finland, and I believe for Team Finland at the World Juniors. At Radia, he potentially could do that, but I don't see the creativity in his hands and his processing to do that.
I think maybe he's fallen out of the first round. Do you think a team's still going to take him in the first round?
I think a team will still take him in the first round. I think he's still probably a top 20 pick, but he's more to 15 to 20 range, whereas he started the year in maybe the top 5 range.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. We'll move on to the Canadians, as this is a Canadians podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So as Matt mentioned, we'll throw out a couple of names for who we think the Canadians could be looking at or should be looking at. I got 2 names that I'm really enamored with, who I think will be in that 30 range.
Mm-hmm.
The first is Sasha Pashtunov.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm pronouncing that right, I'm sorry if I'm brutalizing it. I tend to do better with the pronunciations, but my God, those names just, it's hard. But the second one I find a lot easier. Tyler Boucher. Those are 2 names that I think the Canadians are probably looking at in their range.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of either one?
I think Sasha Pashtunov is probably the better pick. I think he's got more offensive potential, and he can provide more help in the top 6 for Montreal. And he's very he can operate as a goal scorer or a playmaker, and he has some of the best hands in the draft, in my opinion. He's really, he's a player you want controlling the puck, especially in the offensive zone, because he can kind of add a lot of deception in the way he plays and sets up scoring or shot chances for his teammates. I think Tyler Boucher is more of think Josh Anderson, maybe, in the sense. He's a good skater, heavy, has already got NHL size, physically matured, and he could really deliver a physical energy type of game to Montreal's top 9. I think there's more potential for and a higher upside for Pastujov to even contribute on a first line as their left winger, whereas Boucher, I think maybe more of a safer pick. I think he's a I'll be surprised if he doesn't become an NHLer. Like, he's definitely going to be at least a 4th line energy type, like grinder maybe. But I think he could, be in the top 6 potentially, and even as a 3rd liner. I think he had an injury riddled year, so his offensive potential and his skill set at times wasn't fully on display, because I think he just never got into a groove, and his confidence was never fully there this season.
Blaine, you did 2, so I'll do 2 unless you've got something else.
No, you go.
Okay, so my 2 would be Zach Dean out of Gatineau and Zachary Leroux out of Halifax, formerly.
I
love how you go with the Q players.
Formerly of the Moncton Wildcats. Just have to throw that in there.
So Zach Dean is one of my favorites in this draft. I watched him when he was playing in the GTHL AAA for the Toronto Nationals, and you talk about an honest working player, and that's Dean. He is such a workhorse, and he will fish out any puck in the corners or whatever. It doesn't matter what position he plays, center, left wing, right wing. Like, he can play all 3 positions. I love his work ethic more than anything, and I think he's underrated offensively. I think I've seen some people say that his offensive upside is the most questionable one. I think he is so quick and explosive in tight spaces that he will be able to maneuver and produce at the NHL level. And for Zachary Leroux, you want your next Brad Marchand. Well, there he is. I mean, this is such a polarizing player because of the fact that he got suspended 4 times, I think, this past year on the Q. But if you can find a way to have him bring back those emotions but also continue to play like a pest, like he is, and continue to play like a Brad Marchand, then he could actually turn out to be, let's redraft this upcoming NHL draft in 5 years. Zachary Leroux, you could say, he should have been a top 10 pick because you were able to dial down the emotions. He wasn't taking stupid penalties or he wasn't getting suspended. And he's such a big-bodied power forward. He's not afraid of anyone or anything on the ice. He'll go to the net. He'll go to the corners. And the thing that impresses me the most about him is probably, at first you're going to look at the physicality and the aggression he brings. But then I look at the hands and the vision that he also brings. And I think, wow, this guy can set up plays. This guy could put up 50, 60 points in the NHL, no problem. Just as long as, he doesn't become a liability in the penalty box.
So do you think that Lehter's discipline issues and Zach Dean's injury this year caused them to slide down a little bit in the draft to say maybe the end of the second?
I think so. We even had Leroux as high as top 15 at our mid-season rankings, but then we had him drop because a lot of our scouts kind of were just the suspensions and the discipline or lack of discipline was really what kind of made us bring him down. The potential is still very high for him, but I think you have to sometimes take in consideration some of those issues and potential for red flags in a prospect. Ryan Merkley was, one of those players not too long ago where he just had no commitment defensively. And, he was a top 10 maybe pick in that draft because of his skating and his offensive potential, but he couldn't defend. And it didn't seem like he really wanted to. So he dropped to San Jose in the 20s. So I think for Zach Dean, I personally think people are they're not valuing him as high as they should. Maybe I have a little bias because I've watched him since he was 15, 16 years old, but I've also watched Brant Clark, Brennan Hoffman, and even Shane Wright. But, I think Zach Dean has more to offer, and he's a guy who could have a breakout season in the Q next year. And so I think Dean's probably rated appropriately, but Leroux definitely could have been a top 15 guy if it wasn't for the discipline, the lack of discipline.
How much of a troll job would it be for the Canadians to pick a Q League player from Alberta in Dean? That would just be perfect.
It is funny his track record. He's been all across the globe. Zach Dean. It's like Newhook, Alex Newhook, pretty much.
Yeah.
So I think Newhook went the opposite, right? He's from Newfoundland, and he went to Western Canada.
That's right.
So yeah, it'd be pretty funny. I think I think Leroux could be a fan favorite because I think he is from Quebec. I'm not too sure about that, but
he's from just
Quebec,
outside Montreal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he could turn into a fan favorite, especially if he plays the game like Marchand potentially.
It would be kind of I would be all for selecting either one of those guys. It would be kind of neat to see a Newfoundlander go to the Canadians.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. I think there's a potential for two guys. I jotted down two guys that I can briefly mention if you guys want me to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One was Matthew Samskovich. I'm probably saying that wrong.
Played for Chicago, right?
Yeah. So the reason why I put his name down is because the Habs drafted Sean Farrell,
Correct.
who also played for the Chicago Steel. So I think there could be a likeness to Samskovich because they've seen him a lot as their scouts go to see how Farrell has progressed. So, and I think he's a guy who can bring a lot of speed to the lineup on the wing. I don't think he's going to be a centerman. I know he played some center, but I think he's a guy who brings some speed to the wing. And the other player is Samu Tuamala. And he's another really big goal-scoring threat from the wing. And if you can have maybe him and Caulfield as your 1-2 punch coming down the wing and scoring, that would be really deadly. And you have the offense to contribute. I really like, Tuamala I wasn't sold on because I thought he had some inconsistencies to his all-around play. But the U18s, he showed a little more maturity, and he was back checking a little harder. I saw him coming back through the neutral zone and stealing pucks and throwing his weight around. So I think Tuamala has grown on me, and I think he can be a really solid option for Montreal at 30.
If there was one name in the entire draft, regardless of team, who do you think is going to be one of those later draft gems?
I think, I want to say one guy, but I don't think he's that late. He's going to go that late. I think because he goes around the second round. Wyatt Johnston. I think he's a guy who is so versatile and just such like, I don't find a lot of holes in his game. I think he just doesn't have maybe some elite attributes and that's why he gets ranked not inside the first round. So I think he's more of someone who, even though he's a second rounder, I think he could be a steal. Another player, a player that's more near the end of the draft, or potentially for the end of the draft, I would say, is Michael Quinn. No one maybe knows this name, but he played with Scott Morrow with the Shattuck St. Marie program. And when I watched that team play, primarily going to scout Scott Morrow, who is, ranked in maybe the top 50 and an early second rounder potential, I came away being impressed with Michael Quinn. I did not find a lot of holes in his game either for someone who doesn't get talked about. I think he's very mature in the way he defends. He protects the middle so soundly. He's always got the stick in front of him. Really good mobility too when skating backwards to stay with faster players. And offensively, he's really good at maneuvering around the offensive zone and hanging on to the puck if he doesn't see an option, right? If he doesn't see an option, he's going to take that extra second, survey around, and his skating becomes pretty evident there. He's not a high-end skater, but he's a very fluid skater. And I think Michael Quinn is someone that he may not even get drafted, but I think he deserves a little more recognition as a potential late seventh rounder steal. But I think, a lot of what I see in his game is a lot of what I see in, some third pairing NHL players that just go on to have a great career. Like they're just a sound third pairing, or they play as the number 4 on a second pairing and they give you stability that way. They go unnoticed, but they're very effective. That's what I think Michael Quinn could be.
So bigger, more talented Mete.
Yeah, almost. Yeah. Yeah, a little more. I was going to say he reminds me of someone, but I can't bring up the name because he plays for the Leafs. I don't know if you guys want me to say
no,
because he's a Leaf player. I was going to say Travis Dermott. He reminds me a little bit more of Travis Dermott. He has a bit of a physical side, but he's very good at transitioning the puck.
Yeah, I like Dermott.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I'm happy because don't take him away from us because, I don't want him to leave Toronto.
Oh, don't worry. I'm sure Dubas is just going to give him away for something, like a Jared McCann.
Well, I don't know. I don't know because Dubas loves his guys. All right, he doesn't let his guys go, and Dermott is one of his guys. Although McCann did play for Dubas in the Sioux, which I was surprised that he didn't protect him. But we'll see. Hopefully, McCann goes on to only put up like 30 points with Seattle. So us Leafs fans don't feel so bad about that.
Hey, you got to stick with a team that got you so far in the playoffs, right?
Exactly. Exactly. We'll stick with. I can't say anything. Yeah, I can't.
All right, Matt, do you have anything else?
That's everything for me.
All right. Jared, I didn't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're busy. Just trying to find a ride at the TTC in Toronto takes hours. What a horrible city.
Yeah, no, it is so brutal. And then when you do find one, it's jam-packed and you got to stand next to each other. Thankfully, COVID's actually kind of helped us with that.
Yeah.
Don't have to be so close to some strangers that don't know, what showering is. But
Although I got to admit, I'm dying to go back to Ontario. I haven't seen my family in 3 years, so it'd be nice to get back.
There are nice places in Ontario. There are some beautiful places, and I want to. I have a cottage up north near Peterborough, and I want to that's a nice place to go in the summertime to get away from the Leafs not missing the playoffs, but not advancing in the first round.
Go watch the Leafs fall in the autumn instead of the spring.
Yep. That's a good one.
All right. No, I want to thank you for coming on the show. We really appreciate you giving us some of your time, especially in a busy time like this right before the draft. We know it's not an easy thing to do. So I want to thank you for giving us that 30 minutes of your time. Jared, can you just give our listeners one last plug for where they can follow you, where they can find some of your work, and what to watch for?
Yeah, no. Well, first off, thank you. Thanks, guys, for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I'd love to come back on and talk more with you guys, even if it's about the Habs or the Leafs, and we can go at it even more. I'd love to do that. But yeah, if any of your listeners want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at JaredBrown97, and you can see some of my work at draftprospectshockey.com. And we're in the middle of posting some more articles ahead of tomorrow's NHL Entry Draft.
No, you're always welcome back on the show. We like making friends across the hockey world, regardless of what team you follow, because honestly, who gives a crap? It's all about hockey, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
So again, thank you very much for coming on the show, and we hope to see you again real soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, guys.